I wanted to bring in the topic of shame today for discussion and exploration. I've been thinking a lot about the nature of shame and its function, and it plays such a prominent role in human psychology, and we encounter it at times pervasively in our work as psychotherapists. And I thought I would bring in a couple of quotes, 3 quotes actually, 2 from psychological researchers and theorists, and 1 from a 20th century rabbi that I think reference shame in different ways. And I thought it might spark some associations, some perspectives from each of you, because it's something we have to engage with, and I'm wondering what its potential uses are, if there are any, or is it something we need to try to primarily heal in ourselves and in our clients. So the first quote is from Brené Brown, and this is a definition of shame that she brings. Shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience of believing we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Then there's another quote here, brief quote from Gershon Kaufman. He says, "Shame is the breaking of the interpersonal bridge." And then this next quote is a bit longer. This is from Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, actually embedded in some writing he did about prayer. "Who is worthy to be present at the constant unfolding of time? Amidst the meditation of the mountains, the humility of flowers, we are hating, hunting, hurting. Suddenly we feel ashamed of our clashes and complaints in the face of the tacit glory in nature. It is so embarrassing to live. How strange we are in the world, and how presumptuous our doings. Only one response can maintain us: gratefulness. It is gratefulness that makes the soul great." So I thought I would just open it up for initial responses, reactions, feelings that you all have.
So one thing that I feel right away is just gratitude that you brought the topic, because I'm just thinking about how many of the folks I work with, and I'm also thinking about some of the most painful moments in my own life, and shame is a big part of those stories. And so I definitely want to look at it from different sides, and the Heschel quote maybe suggests that there's some positive meaning, and I think I've experimented with that or seen some of that, but I also see how deeply it can just undercut people and stop them and silence them. So I'd really like to kick it around.
Mm-hmm.
I think the second quote about how shame breaks the interpersonal bridge is what landed with me, because when I see shame, when I'm in session with people, a lot of times what it seems like is in moments of deep shame, people don't want to be seen. And so it's not just that, I mean, I don't know why they don't want to be seen. Maybe it's because they feel flawed or imperfect, like Brené Brown said. But my experience of being with it is just all of a sudden I'm really aware that my client doesn't want to be seen. And I don't know how to be, I get very confused about how to be with them in those moments, because what I sense is that they feel exposed. And especially the way we do therapy, when it's very hard not to see each other, sitting right across the room from each other. I feel somehow stripped of what I have to offer when I feel that my client doesn't want to be seen.
Yeah, I resonate with that, Jennifer. I think as a therapist, or maybe for me personally, I think shame is a harder emotion to sit with clinically and relationally. I think of ways we try and broaden affect in certain domains, like if someone's sad or angry, and to help them get in touch with that. But shame sometimes feels like a stuck place. That first quote about feeling unworthy or not deserving of love, I think that's a hard thing for me to tolerate. And so to try and interact with that therapeutically is challenging, important, but it's challenging. And I'm glad you brought this into the discussion here.
I think I can resonate with both of what you're saying, in that it does create this sense of stuckness. And at the same time, what I hear from clients or people that I'm in relationship who are expressing the sense of shame is an invitation as well. And that can seem really opposite of what they're saying, but as they're sharing it, I feel like there's just a table that I can kind of enter into, or a space I can enter into, where they're inviting me to see something that's much deeper than what they're presenting in the moment. I think what I see as my role as a therapist oftentimes is to welcome the most painful parts of someone and allow it to create more space than just the shame that they're bringing in. And so I think that's what came to mind.
I'm kind of wondering about the invitation that you mentioned. I'm not sure that I always feel that shame with my clients. Sometimes feels like a very solitary place for them, and almost like a necessary place of solitude for them to be dwelling in that moment. So I find it tricky sometimes when to know to reach out.
I think I might be speaking more from my personal experience of shame, and how in those moments, yes, I want to hide and push away, not be seen, and at the same time, I feel the same amount of desire for closeness with comfort, safety, contact, connection. So that might be coming just more from my experience of being in that lonely place.
It makes me wonder if, because you're able to draw on your own experience of, on the one hand, desperately wanting to be hidden and not exposed, but on the other hand, yearning for contact, if you're able to kind of listen beyond what the client is leading with, and hear some sort of invitation in it.
So in a way, I bring myself to the room, to the space. Yeah.
But I'm also intrigued, Rush, by what you just said, that maybe sometimes a client needs to really be alone, if I understood you correctly. And I was wondering if you could say more about that.
I guess I was curious as to whether or not being in that space, being in the solitude of one's experience is something that needs to be held and tolerated in the moment, and kind of left to the client to know when they're ready to come out of it, because maybe my conceptualization of it is different, but it could potentially be a generative space, that where you can know yourself in a different way.
Oh, that's powerful. The idea of the shame moment is not being just toxic or stuck, but maybe holding something ripe or something new. And the other thing I associated when you said that is how easy it is to make an unhelpful move when somebody's in a position of shame. Out of my own anxiety or even a sincere response can easily, I think, feel paternalizing, or I'll speak to you who are ashamed from my position of feeling intact and well, and that's really can be dicey. At the same time, I have an association of a men's group as I was in once where two of the guys just got into a really bad conflict in the middle of the group, and then afterwards, one of them in particular kind of railed at the rest of the group, like, why didn't you do something? You sat there and watched us melt down and kind of humiliate ourselves in front of you, and you did nothing? The first rage was nothing like the second rage. I felt convicted at that moment too.
I guess what's one thing that's coming to mind for me too is that the way that we sit with shame in our clients probably also has to do with our attachment styles. And, so whether we have a response to move in close in that moment or a response to sort of stay back could also be related to what, our own experiences of how we were held in those moments growing up.
Great point.
Or not held.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I'm intrigued by this idea that there might be some kinds of shame that are not toxic, that are not breaking of connection to the human community. And I guess I'm associating to, you mentioned a group, and then I got a flood of different memories of running groups where someone would reveal something. There would be some kind of deep personal disclosure that was very vulnerable, and everybody would identify. And suddenly the person was, the interpersonal bridge was not broken. The bridges were built, and there was a coming into contact. It makes me think a little bit about how in shame there's a perception of being completely separate and not part of, almost not human. And there's this sort of paradox that in sharing it we find voicing it or being seen, ideally, at least in a therapeutic setting, ideally there's a sense of normalization of being part of the human community, that everybody has times like this or feelings like this. And then that sort of makes me associate more to the quote from Rabbi Heschel, where there's some sort of shared human condition where we have to recognize our imperfections, and that there's this beauty in the world and there's this glory in the world, and yet we're often doing pretty limited or negative things. And it's sort of, I guess his quote makes me think about transforming shame into kind of humility, which I think I've seen some of that interpersonally too, as I remember some of these group therapy experiences or just experiences in life, my own, of sharing something that I was very ashamed of or self-conscious about, and then feeling accepted and connected.
Yes.
The term or the word humility. I mean, just almost when there's such extreme shame, it seems like there's not really any acceptance. And so, what does it mean to humbly accept something in your life that you find unpleasant or that maybe you deem a flaw or something that you don't particularly enjoy about yourself? And so, I think when I see clients move in what I would deem a healthy direction, there's some level of kind of owning something, well, saying this is okay. I don't like this thing in my life. I don't like this aspect of who I am, but I can tolerate naming this. I can tolerate sitting with someone as I name this. And I don't know, back to that dilemma you were saying of wanting to be known and yet just wanting to be isolated. And I think that's where shame can have so much power, is in isolation. And now it's more than just them coming in and saying something once and then it's gone, but I think it's a process. But there's something about humility in that process that I think resonated with me. But yeah, everyone's journey with that is different. I mean,
And you know, with shame, I think humility around something that feels really bad, not just a little bad, not like the little thing everyone else does, but something I did that's really bad, you know.
What I'm hearing, I think, is that shame in and of itself is not toxic necessarily, but living in shame can become that way if we're stuck in it. But that it serves some kind of function in our lives, or in because it's such a universal experience, that it organizes us in some way, or gives us parameters, or helps us to know different parts of ourselves, or things that we like or things that we don't like. Shapes our morals.
One quote that I came across that I didn't read aloud, but it's from Mencius, the Chinese philosopher. I'll just paraphrase it, but it was something like, human beings cannot live without shame. The experience of shame is how we develop integrity. And I feel like that's a bit about, it connects to something you said, and also what you said with the client, that the fact that this man even felt badly about something showed something important and whole and good in him.
Yes. Yes. It almost feels like the interaction is more meaningful if you don't minimize the badness of. I mean, there's sometimes when it feels like there's a chance to sort of question it, like, was that really so horrible? Or who taught you that it was so horrible? But other times it feels like it's more about saying, no, that wasn't good. I see, you know, almost appreciating the horror someone might feel about something they had done, or a part of themselves they discovered, but then adding something to it.
Yeah.
It's not the last word or the only word or something.
Right.
Maybe I'm beginning to speak about some ways I've tried to wrestle with how to try to move with it.
Yeah.
I don't.
Makes me wonder then the definition of shame, the way that Brene Brown describes in the psychological term. I've wondered if that's a very Western definition, and kind of thinking through my own culture, shame is used in a helpful way, in a sense that it signals to me that I have done something to rupture a relationship. So this signal will help me move toward repair of the rupture. In that way, kind of acknowledging the bad, yes, that's there, and how do I move towards this person that I've hurt that's actually causing me shame. So it's a very relational component that I wonder is missing, or maybe missing from that definition. Or just more nuanced
I think one of the ways that I experience shame too is, like you're saying, you can use it as sort of a signal that maybe there's a rupture and that you need to repair. I think I use it sometimes as a signal, kind of what Brene Brown is saying, that there is something wrong, that either I did something wrong or, I am wrong in some way, but it doesn't always lead to stuckness. Often it can lead to a kind of like self-improvement, more discipline, something like that. And sometimes clients are struggling with that too. Like there's a way that people can get caught up in like endless attempts to improve. And so it's making use of the shame. In a way, shame is functional in some way, but it's almost the opposite extreme. Instead of getting stuck or being immobilized, it's like constant attempts to self-improve. So in some way, it's like, when is that generative, to use your word? And when is it, when is it not?
When does it become shaming, right?
Yeah,
Self-shaming.
exactly,
Like,
exactly.
have to be better, have to be better, have to be
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Because one paradigm it does tap into is, what is the basis of your worth or belongingness?
I'm thinking about one client who suffered a lot of attachment disruption when she was very young, really felt very unloved by her mother, who was really narcissistic. And, she really, really believes that she's essentially unlikable. It's very hard to shift that self-image, that real belief about herself. And she knows about her background and the context, but it doesn't really touch the felt sense of who she is. And I find the only thing that I hope is helpful is really just to, I guess, sort of share my sadness, that, just share my experience of how heartbroken I feel sometimes as I listen to her describe herself, when I feel like it's extremely distorted. She's like a very appealing, likable person. And I don't know for sure if it's really helpful or not, but it feels like the closest thing I've been able to find is just to share my sadness. I don't know if you all can relate to those kinds of moments with particular clients.
Where you just have to kind of let go of the idea that they're going to feel better, or that you can say something that's
Yeah,
going
that
to...
providing more
Yeah.
insight into the, kind of the impact of their history and why they would have this idea about themselves, and tell me more stories about how that felt.
But I wonder if there is something healing in that instead of defending against whatever emotional state that is for the sake of the client, or providing a way out of that state for the client, you join them. You can be with them in
Yeah.
that state. And that there's something that's very relieving about that, just having someone else be in it with you.
Yeah.
Which kind of goes back to what you were saying about how sometimes there's like a desire for contact. Maybe that's the kind of contact, that kind of standing side by side in the feeling of it.
Right.
I wonder if you're almost modeling a somewhat different perspective in those moments, in the sense that I'm sure they experience sadness, but the sadness you're expressing is more of you're seeing the shame-based distortion almost that you named, and trying to give them almost a morsel of okay, but here's what I see, or here's what others likely see, and you're also acknowledging almost internally that you can't just change how they see these things. This has been probably a lifelong process of building this up, but maybe some of those can kind of have a different type of moment that maybe they can't acknowledge in that moment, but ideally over time they're going to shift a bit.